Evan Merrick felt the crushing weight slam into his chest like a sledgehammer at 48 years old, right in the middle of explaining quarterly projections to his board of directors. The mahogany conference table stretched endlessly before him as the room began spinning like a carnival ride from his childhood nightmares. The logistics division has exceeded expectations by... The words froze in his throat as fire exploded behind his ribs. His left arm went numb, tingling, spreading down to his fingertips like ice water in his veins. Evan? Board member Harrison Walsh leaned forward, his weathered face creasing with concern. You look pale? Evan gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white against the polished wood. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. I'm fine, just need a moment. The pain struck again, this time radiating up his neck and down his spine. The presentation slides blurred together, numbers becoming meaningless symbols dancing across the projection screen. Someone called 911! Shouted Patricia Blackwood, his corporate attorney, already reaching for her phone. Through the haze of agony, Evan caught sight of his sister Lauren sitting at the far end of the table. She wasn't moving toward him like the others. She wasn't calling for help or showing panic. Instead, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite place. Calculation mixed with something that looked almost like anticipation. The thought struck him as strange, even as his vision darkened around the edges. Why wasn't Lauren worried? Why did she look like she was waiting for something? Then darkness claimed him completely. Consciousness returned in fragments. The steady beep of monitors, the antiseptic smell of hospital air, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Evan's throat felt like sandpaper, and tubes seemed to snake from every part of his body like mechanical vines keeping him tethered to life. Mr. Merrick, can you hear me? A gentle voice penetrated the fog. A nurse appeared in his peripheral vision, middle-aged, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name tag read Lorraine. Evan tried to speak, but managed only a croak. Lorraine immediately offered him ice chips, the cold providing blessed relief to his parched throat. You've been unconscious for 3 days, she explained, adjusting his IV drip. Massive heart attack. The doctors weren't sure you'd make it through the first night. 3 days. Evan's mind struggled to process the information. 3 days during which anything could have happened to his company, his assets, his life. Your family has been here constantly, Lorraine continued, but something in her tone made Evan focus on her face more intently. Well, your wife and sister have been here quite a bit. Before Evan could ask what she meant, the door opened and Brianna swept in wearing a crimson silk blouse that cost more than most people made in a week. Her perfume, expensive French stuff that usually made him think of romantic evenings, now seemed cloying in the sterile hospital air. Oh, thank goodness you're awake. Brianna rushed to his bedside, but her eyes were already scanning the monitors, reading the numbers displayed there with more interest than she showed in his face. I was so worried. The doctors said it was touch and go for a while. Evan tried to speak, managing only a whisper. How long? 3 days, sweetheart. 3 very long days. Brianna perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, but she seemed restless, checking her phone repeatedly. I've been handling things at home, talking to your business partners, making sure everything stays stable while you recover. Something about her phrasing bothered him. Not until you recover, but while you recover, as if his recovery was temporary, a brief intermission rather than a return to normal life. I actually need to step out for a few minutes, Brianna continued, already standing. There's a call I need to take about the Aspen retreat. The deposit is non-refundable, and I wasn't sure if I should cancel, but now that you're awake, she trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. After she left, Lorraine returned to check his vitals. This time, she looked around carefully before speaking. Mr. Merrick, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but yesterday your wife asked me some unusual questions. Evan turned his head slightly, encouraging her to continue. She wanted to know about your insurance policies, specifically who to contact about claims. She asked about typical recovery times for someone your age with your condition, and Lorraine paused, clearly uncomfortable. She asked about complications, how long patients usually survive after massive heart attacks, what signs to watch for that might indicate deterioration. The heart monitor's beeping increased slightly as Evan processed this information. That's not all, Lorraine whispered, glancing at the door again. Your sister was here yesterday morning, asking similar questions. But she was more focused on your mental capacity, whether patients with your condition typically suffer cognitive impairment, How long before you'd be able to make important business decisions? She specifically asked about power of attorney procedures. Evan closed his eyes, not from exhaustion, but from the crushing realization settling over him like a burial shroud. The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Mr. Merrick, Lorraine continued, I've been a cardiac nurse for 25 years. I've seen a lot of families dealing with collapses. What I haven't seen is family members who seem more interested in the patient's legal and financial situation than their actual recovery. When Evan opened his eyes, Lorraine was looking at him with a mixture of concern and something else, suspicion. Is there someone else you'd like me to call? Someone who might be more genuinely concerned about your well-being? Evan's voice was barely audible. My son, Michael. He's at Boston University. I'll call him immediately. And Mr. Merrick? Lorraine's voice dropped even lower. I'd be very careful about eating or drinking anything your wife brings from home. Hospital food may be terrible, but at least you know what's in it. The implication hit Evan like another heart attack. Lorraine suspected poisoning. For the next 2 days, Evan feigned weakness whenever Brianna or Lauren visited, keeping his eyes mostly closed and responding to questions with weak nods or shakes of his head. Through barely cracked eyelids, he watched them perform their roles as concerned family members, but now he was looking for the details he'd missed before. Brianna's phone calls conducted in hushed tones near the window, her frequent mentions of timeline and moving forward. The way she discussed his recovery in past tense, as if it were already over. Lauren's careful questions about board meetings, succession plans, and emergency protocols. Her suggestions about bringing in temporary leadership to maintain stability. Most tellingly, the way they looked at each other when they thought he was unconscious. Meaningful glances that spoke of shared secrets and coordinated plans. Michael arrived on Thursday evening, his young face etched with worry and exhaustion from the 6-hour drive from Boston. At 22, he had his father's height and his late mother's gentle eyes. His first wife, Sarah, who didn't survive a car accident when Michael was 12. Dad, thank God you're okay, Michael said, gripping Evan's hand tightly. I've been trying to call you for days, but Mom said you were too weak to talk. I'm stronger than they think, Evan managed, his voice growing clearer. Son, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to tell absolutely no one about it. Michael leaned closer. Anything. I need you to go to the office this weekend. Use your keycard to access the security system. Pull all the footage from the boardroom for the day of my heart attack. Not just the meeting, but everything from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Dad, what's going on? I think someone wanted me to have that collapse, and I think they're not finished. Evan's grip on his son's hand tightened. I also need you to access the computer server logs. Check who's been in my files over the past month. And Michael, this was the hardest part. I need copies of your mother's credit card statements and phone records for the last 6 months. Michael's face went pale. You think, Mom? I think your mother has been keeping secrets, bad ones. What about Aunt Lauren? Her too. Check the server logs for her access credentials. See what files she's been looking at and when. Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. If you're right, if they really... What are you going to do? Evan's smile was cold. I'm going to make sure they regret underestimating me. Michael returned Sunday evening with a laptop bag and the haunted expression of someone who'd lost his innocence in a single weekend. He'd followed his father's instructions methodically, and the evidence was damning. The security footage is disturbing, Dad. Michael set up his laptop on the hospital bed's rolling table. Look at this. The first video showed Lauren entering the building at 5:47 a.m. the morning of Evan's heart attack, nearly 3 hours before anyone else typically arrived. Her keycard accessed Evan's office at 5:52 a.m. She was in there for an hour and 20 minutes, Michael said, clicking to the next file. Here's what she was doing. The camera inside Evan's office showed Lauren at his computer, methodically going through files. But she wasn't just browsing. She was copying specific documents to a thumb drive, photographing others with her phone, and taking handwritten notes. I checked the server logs, Michael continued. She accessed your insurance policies, your will, the board succession protocols, and all the major client contracts. She also downloaded the employee database and the financial projections for the next 2 years. What about your mother? Michael's expression darkened. The credit card records show hotel charges I didn't recognize. The Riverside Inn, every Tuesday for the past 3 months, always the same room. The executive suite, always for exactly 3 hours. He clicked to another folder. I did some research on the hotel charges. The rooms were booked under a company called Trask Holdings LLC. Evan's blood ran cold. Gabriel Trask. You know him? He's been trying to buy my company for 2 years. I've turned him down repeatedly. Evan studied the hotel records more carefully. What else? Phone records show dozens of calls between Mom and a number registered to Trask's private line. The calls started 4 months ago. Just a few short conversations at first, then longer ones. In the past month, they've been talking for hours at a time. Michael pulled up another file. I also found this. It was a credit card charge for $15,000 at Cartier Jewelry, dated 3 days before Evan's collapse. I called the store, Michael said quietly. They said Mom bought a gold watch, engraved. The engraving said, "To Gabriel, with all my love, B." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Finally, Evan spoke. What about Lauren's activities outside the office? I hired a private investigator, someone discreet that Patricia Blackwood recommended. Michael handed his father a manila envelope. These photos were taken over the past week. The first photo showed Lauren, Brianna, and a tall, silver-haired man sitting at an outdoor cafe, leaning in close over what appeared to be documents. The second showed the same 3 people toasting with champagne glasses at an upscale restaurant. That's Gabriel Trask, Evan said, recognizing his business rival immediately. The investigator says they've been meeting regularly for weeks, not just social meetings, business meetings. They have lawyers present, documents being signed, money changing hands. Michael pulled out one final photo that made Evan's stomach turn. It showed Brianna and Trask in an intimate embrace outside the hotel. Brianna wearing the crimson blouse she'd worn to the hospital. Dad, I'm sorry. I know this is hard to see. Evan studied the photos with clinical detachment, his business mind cataloging evidence while his heart dealt with the betrayal. No, Michael. I needed to see this. All of it. What do we do now? Now we find out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. And then we destroy them. Robert Torres was the kind of private investigator who looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Weathered face, sharp eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd seen enough human nature to be surprised by nothing. Patricia Blackwood had recommended him with the words, "He finds things people don't want found." Torres met with Evan at the hospital late Tuesday evening, when the visiting hours were over and the corridors were quiet. Mr. Merrick, what your son showed me is just the tip of the iceberg, Torres said, spreading photographs across the hospital bed table. Your wife and sister haven't just been unfaithful. They've been running a comprehensive operation to remove you from your own company. The first set of photos showed Gabriel Trask's office building. I've been watching Trask's headquarters for a week. Your sister visits twice a week, always carrying briefcases, always staying for hours. She's not just passing information, she's actively collaborating. Torres showed Evan a telephoto shot of Lauren in Trask's conference room, pointing at documents while Trask and several other men listened intently. I managed to get close enough to overhear part of one meeting, Torres continued. Your sister was briefing them on your company's upcoming contract bids, your cash flow situations, and your personal health information. She told them about your father's heart disease history, your stress levels, your irregular eating habits, everything they'd need to predict when you might be vulnerable. She's been sabotaging us from the inside, Evan realized. More than that, I traced 3 major contracts your company lost in the past 4 months. In each case, the winning bid came from companies with direct ties to Trask. They knew your bid amounts before you submitted them. Torres pulled out another folder. But the personal conspiracy is even worse. I followed your wife to a medical appointment last week that she didn't put on any insurance claims. He handed Evan a photograph of Brianna entering a small medical office in a strip mall across town. That's Dr. William Chen. He lost his medical license 2 years ago for prescribing dangerous medications to patients without proper medical justification. He now operates what you might call a consulting practice for people who need medical advice of a questionable nature. Evan's grip tightened on the photograph. What kind of consultation? According to my sources, your wife asked about medications that could trigger heart attacks in patients with existing cardiac risk factors, specifically compounds that would be difficult to detect in standard toxicology screens. The heart monitor's beeping increased as Evan processed this information. Did she obtain anything? Doctor? Chen provided her with a substance that, when mixed with booze, can cause severe cardiac stress in someone with your medical profile. The compound breaks down quickly in the bloodstream, making it nearly undetectable unless you know specifically what to look for. Torres leaned forward. Mr. Merrick, I need to ask you directly. Do you remember drinking anything unusual the night before your medical crisis? Evan's mind raced back to that evening. Brianna opened a bottle of wine. A vintage Bordeaux she said she'd been saving for a special occasion. It tasted bitter. I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe the wine had turned. Do you still have the bottle? It should be at home. We didn't finish it. Torres made a note. I'll need to test that wine. If it contains the compound Dr. Chen described, we'll have proof of attempted elimination. Evan spent the next 3 days planning his counterattack with the methodical precision that had built his business empire. But this time, he wasn't building. He was preparing to destroy. His first call was to Patricia Blackwood. Patricia, I need you to make some changes to my corporate structure, and I need it done quietly. What kind of changes? Remove Lauren from all accounts and decision-making authority. Change the succession protocols to require unanimous board approval for any leadership changes, and create a new holding company, one that owns controlling interest in Merrick Logistics. Evan, that's a significant restructuring. It'll trigger automatic notifications to anyone with power of attorney. That's why we're going to do it in stages, and we're going to make it look routine. Corporate compliance updates, standard governance improvements, that sort of thing. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Are you planning what I think you're planning? I'm planning to survive. Everything else is just consequences. His second call was to Robert Torres. I want round-the-clock surveillance on all of them. I want to know where they go, who they talk to, what they eat for breakfast. And I want recordings of their conversations whenever possible. That's expensive, Mr. Merrick. Money isn't an issue. Survival is. His third call was to Michael. Son, I need you to transfer half of your trust fund to a new account, one that only you can access, with no connection to me or the company. Dad, what's going on? Insurance. If something happens to me, if they succeed in their plan, I want to make sure you have resources they don't know about. Resources you can use to fight back. You really think they'd hurt you? Evan looked at the wine bottle Torres had retrieved from his house, now being tested at a private lab. Son, they already tried. On Thursday morning, Evan called a family meeting at his house. He'd been discharged from the hospital against medical advice, claiming he needed familiar surroundings to recover. What he really needed was a controlled environment for the performance of his life. Brianna and Lauren arrived within minutes of each other, too quickly for coincidence, suggesting they'd coordinated their timing. They both wore expressions of concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. Evan, you look tired, Brianna said, settling into her usual chair in the living room. Are you sure you should be out of the hospital? I needed to come home, Evan replied, deliberately adding a slight tremor to his voice. Being in that place, surrounded by all those machines, it made me realize how fragile everything is. Lauren leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, I could have gone. I almost did die. And lying in that hospital bed, I started thinking about what would happen to the company, to our family, if I'm not capable of running things anymore. He watched their faces carefully as he spoke. Brianna's expression brightened almost imperceptibly. Lauren sat up straighter, suddenly more alert. The doctors say I need to reduce stress, Evan continued. They're concerned about another heart attack. They think the pressure of running the company might be too much for me now. Oh, sweetheart, Brianna said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. You don't need to worry about any of that right now. Just focus on getting better. But I do need to worry about it. The board is getting nervous. Clients are asking questions about continuity. If I can't provide strong leadership. He let the sentence hang. Lauren couldn't contain herself. Evan, you know I've always been willing to take on more responsibility. With my MBA and my experience in corporate law, I could help stabilize things while you recover. That's very generous, Lauren, but I'm not sure that's enough. We might need to consider more dramatic options. What kind of options? Brianna asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Maybe it's time to consider a partnership, or even a merger. Someone with the resources and expertise to handle the day-to-day operations while I focus on my health. The two women exchanged a quick glance, so brief that Evan might have missed it if he hadn't been watching for it. Do you have anyone in mind? Lauren asked. Evan pretended to consider this. Well, Gabriel Trask has made offers before. I've always turned him down, but maybe I was being too proud. Maybe it's time to swallow my pride and think about what's best for everyone. Brianna's face lit up with what looked like genuine excitement. That's that's actually a wonderful idea, Evan. Gabriel is so experienced, and he has such a good reputation in the industry. You know Gabriel? Evan asked innocently. Well, I've heard of him, of course, haven't we all? Lauren nodded enthusiastically. I actually met him at a conference last year. Very impressive man. Very capable. Maybe you could arrange a meeting, Evan suggested. Somewhere private, where we could discuss options without word getting out to competitors or the press? I could make some calls, Lauren said, already reaching for her phone. Actually, Brianna interjected, I might have a more direct connection. Let me see what I can arrange. After they left, Evan allowed himself a cold smile. They'd taken the bait completely. Now it was time to set the trap. The recording. The meeting with Gabriel Trask was arranged for the following Wednesday at Trask's private office in downtown Manchester. Evan arrived looking appropriately frail and defeated, playing the part of a broken man, ready to surrender his life's work. What none of them knew was that Evan was wearing state-of-the-art recording equipment, courtesy of Robert Torres and his contacts in corporate security. A tiny camera in his shirt button captured video, while a nearly invisible microphone in his collar recorded crystal-clear audio. Trask's office was everything Evan had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture designed to intimidate, and artwork that cost more than most people's houses. Trask himself was tall and silver-haired, with the kind of carnivory smile that sharks wore just before they struck. Evan, I'm so sorry to hear about your health scare, Trask said, gesturing to a leather chair positioned to put him in a superior position. I hope you're taking care of yourself. That's why I'm here, Evan replied, settling into the chair with deliberate weakness. I need to face reality about my limitations. Brianna and Lauren flanked him like bodyguards, their presence both protective and possessive. Evan noticed how comfortable they seemed in Trask's office, how familiar they were with the layout and the staff. I understand you're reconsidering my previous offers, Trask said, leaning back in his executive chair. The heart attack changed my perspective, Evan admitted. I used to think the company was everything. Now I realize my health has to come first. Very wise. Though I have to tell you, Evan, the market conditions have changed since we last discussed this. Your company has faced some challenges recently. What kind of challenges? Trask pulled out a folder that looked suspiciously well prepared. Lost contracts, questions about leadership stability, rumors about your health affecting your judgment. These things impact valuation. How much of an impact? Given the current circumstances, I could offer 40% of what we discussed last year. The number hit Evan like a physical blow, but he forced himself to remain calm. 40% of his life's work, reduced to a fraction of its worth because of orchestrated instability. That seems low, Evan said weakly. It's the reality of the market, Evan, but I'm prepared to offer something additional to sweeten the deal. Trask turned to Lauren. Your sister has impressed me with her business acumen. I'd be willing to offer her a senior position in the merged organization. Lauren tried to look surprised, but Evan could see the excitement in her eyes. That's very generous, Gabriel. And Brianna, Trask continued, I understand you have a background in public relations. We could use someone with your skills to help manage the transition. Brianna beamed. I'd be honored to help however I can. Evan looked back and forth between his wife and sister. They were practically vibrating with anticipation, barely able to contain their triumph. This is all very generous, Evan said finally, but I need time to think about it. Of course, Trask replied, but his tone carried a subtle threat. Though I should mention that these kinds of opportunities don't last forever. Market conditions can change quickly. Your health situation could deteriorate. It would be unfortunate if circumstances forced a less favorable arrangement. The threat was clear. Accept the lowball offer now or risk losing everything if another health crisis occurred. I understand, Evan said. Could I have a few days to consider? Naturally, but Evan, Trask leaned forward, his carnivory smile widening. I hope you understand that this offer represents a chance for everyone to win. Your health improves, your family is taken care of, and your company gets the leadership it needs to thrive. Everyone benefits. Everyone except Evan, who would be pushed aside and forgotten while they divided up his empire. That evening, Evan met with Robert Torres and a new addition to their team, Special Agent Sarah Montgomery from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. Agent Montgomery was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, with the bearing of someone who'd built her career putting powerful people in prison. Mr. Merrick, what you've uncovered appears to be a comprehensive conspiracy involving fraud, insider trading, and potentially attempted elimination, Agent Montgomery said, reviewing the evidence spread across Torres's office conference table. The recordings from today's meeting are particularly damning, Torres added. Trask essentially admitted to using insider information to devalue your company, and he made what could be interpreted as threats about your health situation. Agent Montgomery studied the photographs Torres had taken over the past weeks. The pattern of meetings, the coordination between your wife and sister, the involvement of the unlicensed physician. This isn't opportunistic betrayal. This is organized criminal conspiracy. She picked up the lab report on the wine bottle. The toxicology results confirm the presence of a compound that could trigger cardiac events. Combined with your medical history, this represents a serious attempt to cause bodily damage. What's our next step? Evan asked. We need more evidence. Recorded conversations, financial records, documented proof of the insider trading. Your sister's access to confidential company information gives us a strong foundation, but we need to show intent and coordination. Torres leaned forward. I can get closer to their meetings, plant listening devices, photograph documents, maybe even get someone inside their operation. How long do we have? Evan asked. Agent Montgomery consulted her notes. Based on the timeline you've described, they're moving quickly. The longer you delay accepting Trask's offer, the more desperate they'll become. Desperate people make mistakes. They also take more extreme measures, Evan pointed out, which is why we need to accelerate our investigation. Mr. Merrick, are you willing to wear a wire for future meetings? To put yourself at risk to gather evidence? Evan's smile was cold. Agent Montgomery, they've already tried to end me once. I'm not about to let them succeed on the second attempt. The trap was set for the following Monday morning. Evan had called an emergency board meeting, ostensibly to discuss his health situation and potential leadership changes. He'd invited all the key players, the board members Lauren, Brianna, and Gabriel Trask as a potential strategic partner. What they didn't know was that he'd also invited several other parties, FBI agents posing as business consultants, securities, regulators disguised as accountants, and Robert Torres masquerading as a corporate security specialist. The boardroom where Evan had nearly ended 3 weeks earlier had been transformed into a theater of justice. Hidden cameras captured every angle. Recording equipment monitored every word. And Evan had strategically placed key documents where they would be most visible to the hidden cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan began, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I've called this meeting to discuss some recent developments regarding our company's security and future direction. Gabriel Trask shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Evan, I thought this was going to be a private discussion about our merger proposal. Oh, it is. In fact, I'd like you to repeat that proposal for everyone here. Specifically, the part about how my health crisis has affected the company's valuation. Trask glanced nervously at Lauren and Brianna, clearly sensing that something had changed in Evan's demeanor. Perhaps this should be discussed in a smaller group, Lauren suggested. I think the full board should hear this, Evan replied firmly. After all, if I'm as incapacitated as you've suggested, they'll need to make informed decisions about the company's future. Trask was trapped. Either he revealed the insider information he'd been using, or he looked like he was trying to deceive the board about the company's true value. Well, Trask said carefully, given the recent loss of major contracts, questions about leadership succession, and the uncertainty around your health situation, the market valuation has naturally declined. Interesting, Evan said, activating the room's projection system. Can you be more specific about which contracts we lost? The Riverside shipping deal, the Northern Transport Partnership, the Harbor Logistics acquisition? Board member Harrison Walsh frowned. Mr. Trask, those contract details weren't made public. How do you know about them? Trask's face paled. Industry sources, you understand. Word gets around in our business. Does it? Evan clicked to the next slide, showing server access logs. Because these records indicate that someone with administrative privileges accessed those confidential contract files and downloaded them to external drives. The timestamps correspond exactly with your meetings with my sister. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Lauren shot to her feet. Evan, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Lauren. I'm stating facts. Evan clicked to phone records. These are call logs showing extensive communication between you, my wife, and Mr. Trask over the past 4 months. The frequency increases dramatically in the days leading up to each contract loss. Brianna finally found her voice. Evan, you're not well. This paranoia, these accusations, it's exactly what the doctors warned about. The stress of your condition is affecting your judgment. Is it? Evan activated the audio system. Let's see what you think of this. Gabriel Trask's recorded voice filled the room. Given the current circumstances, I could offer 40% of what we discussed last year. These kinds of opportunities don't last forever. Market conditions can change quickly. Your health situation could deteriorate. Then Lauren's voice. That's very generous, Gabriel. And Brianna's. Gabriel is so experienced, and he has such a good reputation in the industry. That recording was made 3 days ago, Evan announced. Notice how my wife claims to barely know Mr. Trask, despite months of documented meetings and communications. The board members were staring at Lauren and Brianna in shock and disgust. Harrison Walsh looked like he might be sick. The most interesting part, Evan continued, is the timeline. Lauren began accessing confidential files 6 months ago. The first documented communication with Trask occurred 5 months ago. My wife's hotel meetings with Trask began 3 months ago, and Dr. William Chen was consulted about cardiac triggering medications 2 months ago. Special Agent Montgomery stood up from her position at the back of the room, her FBI credentials clearly visible. Gabriel Trask, Lauren Merrick, Brianna Merrick, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, insider trading, corporate espionage, and conspiracy to commit bodily damage. The next few minutes were chaos. Handcuffs snapped into place, Miranda rights were recited, and lawyers were frantically called. Lauren screamed that she was being framed, her voice echoing off the conference room walls. Brianna went completely silent, staring at Evan with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. Trask demanded his attorney and refused to say another word, but his face had gone gray with the realization that his empire was crumbling around him. For the record, Patricia Blackwood announced, standing with a folder of legal documents, as of this morning, Mr. Evan Merrick has restructured the corporate ownership of Merrick Logistics. All previous succession agreements are null and void. Miss Lauren Merrick has been removed from all accounts and decision-making authority. Mrs. Brianna Merrick's power of attorney has been permanently revoked. She handed another set of documents to one of the journalists present. These are divorce papers filed this morning in Superior Court. The plaintiff is seeking dissolution of marriage based on fraud, infidelity, conspiracy, and attempted bodily damage. As the arrestees were led away, board member Harrison Walsh approached Evan. My God, Evan, how long have you known? About the affair? A few weeks? About the business conspiracy? About 10 days? About the attempt on my life? Evan's smile was cold as winter. I figured that out when I woke up in the hospital and realized they were more interested in my insurance policies than my pulse rate. Over the following weeks, as federal investigators dug deeper into the conspiracy, the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Lauren had been systematically stealing from the company for over a year, skimming percentages from major contracts and redirecting funds to accounts she shared with Trask. The investigation revealed a sophisticated operation. Lauren would identify upcoming contract opportunities and feed the information to Trask, who would then ensure that his network of partner companies submitted more competitive bids. When Merrick Logistics lost the contracts, Lauren would claim the losses were due to Evan's declining judgment and leadership. Meanwhile, Brianna had been documenting Evan's daily routines, stress levels, and health information, building a case for his mental and physical incompetence while simultaneously working to hasten his decline. Dr. William Chen agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the most chilling aspect of the conspiracy. Mrs. Merrick approached me in February, Chen testified during his plea hearing. She said her husband was under enormous stress and that she was worried about his health. She wanted to know about medications that could accelerate cardiac problems in someone with his risk factors. What did you tell her? The prosecutor asked. I explained that there were compounds that, when combined with booze, could trigger cardiac events in susceptible individuals. Compounds that would break down quickly in the bloodstream, making them difficult to detect in standard toxicology screens. Did Mrs. Merrick request these compounds? Yes. She said she wanted to be prepared in case her husband's condition deteriorated naturally. She claimed she wanted to ease his suffering, if he became terminal. Did you provide these compounds? I did, along with specific instructions about dosage and administration. Did Mrs. Merrick indicate when she planned to use these compounds? Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She said she was waiting for the right opportunity, a time when her husband would be drinking booze and under stress. She mentioned something about a board meeting or business celebration. Evan, listening to the testimony from the gallery, remembered the bottle of wine Brianna had insisted on opening the night before his heart attack. The expensive Bordeaux she'd claimed was for a special celebration of his latest business success, the wine that had tasted bitter and made him feel dizzy and nauseous. Lauren's trial came first, and it was a masterclass in the destruction of a defense based on family loyalty and misunderstanding. The prosecution methodically laid out the evidence: server logs showing systematic data theft, bank records revealing diverted funds, recorded conversations detailing the conspiracy. Lauren's attorney attempted to portray her as a loyal sister trying to save the family business from her brother's declining health, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury heard recordings of Lauren discussing accelerating the timeline and removing obstacles to progress. Most damaging was a phone conversation Torres had recorded between Lauren and Trask 2 days before Evan's heart attack. The medical consultant says the compound should work within hours if administered properly, Lauren's voice said. And you're sure Brianna can handle her part? Trask replied. She's been preparing for weeks. She knows his schedule, his habits, his medical vulnerabilities. Tomorrow night is perfect. Board meeting stress, late dinner, wine to celebrate the quarterly results. What about afterward? The succession protocols? I'll be able to push through emergency leadership changes within days. The board trusts me, and with Evan incapacitated, or worse, they'll accept my recommendations. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Lauren was convicted on all counts: corporate espionage, fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to attempted elimination. She received 12 years in federal prison. Brianna's trial was more complex, involving detailed medical testimony about the effects of the compound found in the wine bottle. The prosecution had to prove not just that she'd obtained the substance, but that she'd administered it with intent to cause serious bodily damage. Dr. Chen's testimony was devastating. Under direct examination, he described in clinical detail how the compound worked and how Brianna had specifically requested information about triggering heart attacks in her husband. Mrs. Merrick asked very specific questions, Chen testified. She wanted to know about dosage, timing, and detection. She was particularly interested in how to make a cardiac event appear natural. Did she express any concern about her husband's well-being? No. Her questions were focused entirely on effectiveness and avoiding detection. She asked about survival rates and whether sufferers typically recovered from induced cardiac events. The defense attempted to portray Brianna as a desperate woman driven to extreme measures by years of emotional neglect. But the prosecution countered with evidence of the systematic nature of her actions. Financial records showed she'd been siphoning money from joint accounts for months, moving funds to accounts Trask controlled. Hotel records documented dozens of meetings that had clearly become both romantic and business-focused. Most damning was a series of text messages recovered from her phone, sent to Trask in the days leading up to Evan's heart attack. Everything is ready for tomorrow night. E has been under tremendous stress, perfect conditions. The compound is prepared. I'll add it to the wine after dinner before the board meeting discussion. Once this is over, we can move to the next phase. Lauren says the board will accept emergency leadership changes immediately. The jury convicted Brianna on charges of conspiracy, fraud, attempted elimination, and spousal endangerment. She received 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. Gabriel Trask's trial was the most complex, involving not just the conspiracy against Evan, but years of questionable business practices that the FBI investigation had uncovered. Trask had been running what amounted to a criminal enterprise, using insider information, industrial espionage, and intimidation to build his business empire. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Recorded conversations detailing the conspiracy, financial records showing payments to Lauren for confidential information, communications with Dr. Chen about the cardiac compounds, and testimony from numerous other business leaders who'd been targeted by similar schemes. Most devastating was a recorded phone call made the morning after Evan's heart attack, when Trask thought the plan had succeeded. "It's done," Trask's voice said. "Merrick is in intensive care, probably won't survive the week. Lauren says the board is already discussing emergency succession." "What about his son?" another voice asked. "He's in college, doesn't understand the business." By the time he figures out what happened, we'll own everything. And Brianna? She'll be comfortable. Very comfortable. I take care of people who help me succeed. The conversation continued with Trask discussing how to accelerate the acquisition of Merrick Logistics and eliminate any remaining obstacles to the takeover. Trask was convicted on multiple federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy to commit elimination. He received 25 years in federal prison and forfeiture of most of his business assets. 2 years after the trials, Evans stood in his rebuilt boardroom, addressing a company that had not only survived the betrayal, but had emerged stronger than ever. The attempted takeover had actually strengthened their market position, as clients and partners rallied around a CEO who'd survived such a comprehensive conspiracy. Michael had joined the company full-time after graduating from college, bringing fresh energy and perspectives unmarked by the cynicism that had briefly consumed his father. Together, they'd expanded into new markets, implemented transparent governance practices, and established a corporate culture built on genuine trust rather than family obligation. The personal costs had been severe. Evan's relationship with most of his extended family was irreparably damaged. Many blamed him for destroying Lauren's life by pressing criminal charges. His marriage was over, his faith in intimate relationships shattered. But he'd discovered something valuable in the wreckage, a clarity of purpose and inner strength he'd never known he possessed. The heart attack that was supposed to end him had instead revealed the corruption at the center of his life. By surviving it, by fighting back, he'd learned who he really was beneath the successful businessman facade. Any regrets? Michael asked one evening as they reviewed expansion plans. Evan considered the question carefully. About exposing the conspiracy? About pressing charges? No, they made their choices, and choices have consequences. What about Mom? I regret that she chose betrayal over communication. I regret that she chose Trask's promises over our marriage. But I don't regret stopping her before she could finish what she started. Michael was quiet for a moment. Do you think you'll ever trust someone like that again? Maybe. Someday. But not until I understand how I missed the signs for so long. Your mother and aunt fooled me completely. I need to learn from that before I risk it again. 3 years after the trials, Evan received an unexpected call. Lauren was seriously ill, liver cancer, and wanted to see him. She was being held at a minimum security federal prison in Connecticut, and the doctors were giving her perhaps 6 months to live. Against his better judgment and Michael's advice, Evan made the drive. The prison was a low-security facility that resembled a college campus more than a correctional institution. Lauren had aged dramatically in 3 years. Her hair gray, her face gaunt, her movements careful and painful. "Thank you for coming," she said as they sat across from each other in the sterile visiting room. "I wasn't certain you would. I'm here because you said you were dying. If this is some kind of manipulation..." "It's not." Lauren's laugh was bitter and painful. "Liver cancer. Apparently, years of stress and poor decisions catch up with you eventually. The irony isn't lost on me. What did you want to tell me?" Lauren was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts and her courage. "Evan, I need you to know that the morning of your heart attack, I was trying to stop what was happening." Evan frowned. "Stop what?" "Brianna's plan. I knew she'd gotten the compound from Chen. I knew she was planning to use it that night. I went to your office early that morning to gather evidence to take to the authorities. That's not what the server logs showed. I know, because I was too late. By the time I realized how far Brianna had gone, how dangerous her plan was, everything was already in motion. I was copying files to take to the FBI, but then you collapsed during the board meeting, and everything accelerated beyond my control." Evan studied his sister's face, looking for deception but seeing only pain and exhaustion. "Why should I believe you now?" Lauren reached into her pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Because I have proof. This is a letter I wrote to the FBI the night before your heart attack. I never sent it because I was terrified of the consequences for our family, for the company. I thought I could still handle things quietly." She handed him the envelope. The postmark was from 3 years earlier, dated the night before his heart attack, but it had never been mailed. Evan opened it and read a detailed letter outlining Brianna's plan, Dr. Chen's involvement, Gabriel Trask's role in the conspiracy, and Lauren's own participation in the early stages of the insider trading scheme. "The truth is, Evan, I did start working with Trask. I was angry about being excluded from major decisions, about being treated like a junior partner despite my education and experience. But when I realized Brianna was planning to hurt you, I tried to back out. But you didn't succeed. No, I didn't, and that failure will haunt me for whatever time I have left. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of shared history and mutual betrayal heavy between them. Why tell me this now? Evan finally asked. Because I need you to know that not everything was as simple as it appeared in court. I betrayed your trust. I violated my responsibilities to the company, but I never wanted you to die. That was all Brianna and Trask. It doesn't change the consequences, Lauren. I know. But I needed you to understand that in the end I remembered who I was supposed to be. I remembered that you were my brother before you were my business partner. Evan's final act in this chapter of his life was visiting Brianna. She'd been transferred to a women's correctional facility in Massachusetts and had become a model prisoner, earning her GED and working in the prison library. Unlike Lauren, Brianna appeared healthy and had adapted well to incarceration. You look good, she said when he sat down across from her in the visiting room. Successful, happy even. Prison appears to agree with you, Evan replied without warmth. Brianna laughed, but there was no humor in it. As direct as ever. I suppose you visited Lauren before she passed? Yes. Did she tell you about trying to stop me? She did. Do you believe her? Evan considered the question. It doesn't matter what I believe about Lauren's final intentions. What matters is what you did. Fair enough? Brianna leaned forward, her expression serious. Evan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think there's any possibility that you could ever forgive me? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Evan looked at the woman who'd shared his bed for 15 years, who'd borne his children, who'd built a life with him, the woman who'd tried to end him when that life became inconvenient to her ambitions. No, he said finally. I don't think forgiveness is possible. Brianna nodded as if she'd expected that answer. I understand, but I need you to know something about what happened, about why I made the choices I did. I know why. You wanted money, excitement, a different life? That's part of it, but it's not the whole truth. Brianna's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Evan, what I felt for Gabriel wasn't love. It was desperation. Desperation? I was drowning in our marriage. You were so focused on building the company, on achieving success, that I became invisible. Not just neglected, invisible. I could have disappeared entirely and you wouldn't have noticed for weeks. Evan felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it wasn't his heart. It was anger. So you decided to make me disappear instead. I decided to take control of my life, to stop being a passenger in someone else's dream. Brianna's eyes filled with tears. I know how that sounds. Selfish, evil, inexcusable. But I felt like I was suffocating, Evan. Like I was slowly disappearing into nothing. And Gabriel offered you something different. Gabriel offered me power. Not just money or romance, but actual power. The ability to make decisions, to affect outcomes, to matter in a way I hadn't mattered in years. Evan stood up, the conversation becoming too painful to continue. Evan, wait. Brianna stood too, her voice desperate. I need you to know, whatever else I did, whatever other lies I told, I did love you. That was real. Evan looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the woman who'd betrayed him, but the young woman he'd fallen in love with 20 years earlier. I loved you too, Brianna. That's what makes this unforgivable. 5 years after the heart attack that was supposed to end his life, Evan Merrick stood at the podium of the New Hampshire Business Council's annual dinner, accepting their Entrepreneur of the Year award. His company had grown beyond his wildest dreams, expanding internationally and becoming a model for ethical business practices. Michael was now president and COO, clearly being prepared to eventually take over the company. He'd married his college girlfriend and they were expecting Evan's first grandchild, a fresh start for a family that had been nearly destroyed by betrayal. But personal relationships remained elusive. Evan had dated several women over the years, but none had developed into anything serious. The scars from Brianna's betrayal ran deep, making it difficult to trust completely, to be vulnerable, to believe that someone could love him for himself rather than his success. 5 years ago, Evan began his acceptance speech. I learned that success without integrity is just sophisticated failure. I learned that the people closest to you can become your greatest enemies if you stop paying attention to who they're becoming. And I learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is also the thing that saves your life. As Evan left the podium to sustained applause, he reflected on the journey from that hospital bed to this moment of recognition. The heart that had nearly stopped beating had learned to beat again, not just with life, but with purpose, integrity, and hope.